Right here, everybody ready? Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I have an injured left
Welcome to the Oroville City Council meeting. June 5th, voting day. I voted 3 times. I got all 3 stickers. What?
3 times?
3 times.
That's great.
Well, I dropped off 3 ballots.
Gotcha.
Okay. I was trying to figure that one out.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Jack Berry.
Here.
Councilmember Marlene Del Rosario.
Yes.
Councilmember Linda Draper is absent. Councilmember Art Hatley.
Here.
Councilmember Scott Thompson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Janet Goodson.
Here.
And Mayor Linda Dahlmeyer.
Here. So let's convene to closed session.
It's all right. It's all right. We left. I figured you would come by and we were gone.
Oh, I did. I was,
Yeah.
I waited for a long time. And I said, well,
Yeah.
they're not, evidently
No,
knew I
he
was
just,
coming.
yeah. Yeah, he's walking around more and doing more, so he's kind of gotten out of it, I think. But he was really in a funk there for a while. But I had to go they killed some of the nerves in my back too. Yeah, and they call it an ablation, and so I couldn't do as much. I was feeling bad, and so today and yesterday he actually pitched in and did more.
Oh, he's taking care of you.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
Works for me. My turn.
I'll try to get over sometime.
Okay,
And
just visit
I'm
with
gonna get
him.
out. I want to look at his Corvette again.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that'll.
Maybe that will. Yeah, and he's got a potential grandson-in-law who would work on it with him. Sydney's new boyfriend is a mechanic, an airplane mechanic.
Does he live around here?
He was taught by Bill Bynum. He lives in Biggs. He was taught by Tammy and Bill.
That's close enough.
Yeah, and they think he is a prince, and I do too. I told her I'd kill her if she broke off with him. I mean, he comes in and he says, "What can I do for you? Do you have anything that you need done?" Yeah, and it's his way of. I mean, it's not put on. It's his way. Yeah, yeah.
See if it's really real.
Yeah. Well, everybody says it is. He said he's really that way. Okay.
Okay, next time I come over, be home.
Okay. How are you tonight? I have stuff for you. Oh, excuse me, Janet. I didn't mean to elbow you. I'm so sorry. I'm going to get another bottle of water. One is not going to be enough tonight. I had that damn ablation surgery, and I'm so sore. Ablation.
Never heard of that.
They burn nerves in your back.
Welcome everybody to the Oroville City Council meeting. Welcome everybody to the Oroville City Council meeting. Thank you for coming this evening. We've just gotten back from closed session, direction given, but no action taken. I see a young gentleman out there that would you like to come up here and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance? Would you? You know what, I think you should just come up here, right? You want to come all the way up here? I'll give you a microphone.
He does a better job than I did.
Council member. What's your name?
Gregory.
What's your name?
Gregory.
Gregory, it's nice to meet you. So why don't you come stand right here and you can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? Come on up. Here, you want the microphone? There you go. Say salute.
Salute.
Pledge.
Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Someday maybe you can sit up here, okay? Saved me a few steps. I don't know about you, but it's a little warm in here. A little warm. We're all getting used to this new format on the agenda, so bear with us here. Okay, moving on, we have a presentation this evening by RSG, Local Control of Future Housing, Current State Law Impacts. Welcome.
Hi.
Is this, yeah, it's a real pale
Now it
little,
is.
perfect.
Is that better?
Yeah. Speak into the microphone so we can get you on record. Thank
Great.
you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Jim Simon with RSG. We're the city's consultant on a number of real estate and affordable housing projects and other things we've done for you over the years. And so we're here tonight to talk about some housing legislation because, as you may have heard in the news, cities are starting to experience the impacts of the bills that were passed last year, and we wanted to get an opportunity to talk to you all to make sure you understand how to be prepared for these and what it may mean for the city of Oroville. So we'll get right into it. What do I point at here? No, you told me that. There we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, in 2017, there were actually 15 affordable housing bills and also bills to trigger the production of market rate housing that were passed in the legislature, and those went into effect on January of this year. Probably the ones that were most impactful were AB 879 and SB 35, which is what we'll be talking about tonight, which really get into providing greater consequences to communities for fulfilling sort of administrative duties insofar as completing certain reporting activities, which we'll talk about, as well as approving projects for permits and what that is. So to kind of back up, because I think it's kind of helpful to understand sort of where the legislature was coming from with this, I think we all know that housing production statewide is not kept up with demand. That's no secret. In fact, that's true across the country, really. Where we're seeing housing costs escalate all over. The lack of production is causing folks who are at the senior levels as well as folks who are young adults to move out of state. I have a daughter that just is in that category myself. Moved across the country to North Carolina. So, you know, we're seeing those impacts, and it's significant because it affects our economy, it affects obviously quality of life and all those things that come with it. The state did a study and looked at some of the reasons for what was going on, and it found that many situations where projects were getting approved, but were not getting approved at their maximum density, and that was one factor that I think was a significant concern to the state. And now, why is that important? Because you could argue, well, maximum density just means maximum. Yes, that's true, but the maximum density was also used in the housing element to justify that the city had a reasonable number of sites to do both the market rate and the affordable housing. So for everyone here in the audience and maybe watching this, cities have housing elements that cover a 7-year time period. And those housing elements are based upon an allocation of the regional housing needs that are put forward by the local planning group, and each city gets a share of what's called a fair share of that allocation, based upon a number of different factors, land available, demand for housing, and a number of factors. And then you prepare a housing element around those RHNA goals. It is basically sets forth, here's what we're going to do to fulfill this. And in many cases, the state HCD does not approve housing elements if they don't have a sufficient number of sites available. So when you're not building at maximum density, you're essentially not fulfilling your obligation. And for years, this has really been an issue where we've known it to be a problem, but there hasn't been a lot of teeth in past laws. It's just you didn't fulfill, so therefore you didn't fulfill, and that was it. And it's really not just a problem that's associated with urban communities. And so I wanted to maybe illustrate that for everyone here. I apologize, it's a little blurry. I think I probably tried to put too many data pieces on here, but what we're showing is two bars. One is the top bar, which is the percentage of housing that's for renters. So, you see it at about roughly anywhere from 40 to 60%, depending on the jurisdiction. California, it's a little over 48%. The total housing supply is rental housing. And then the green bar really shows how many households are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Now, in a perfect world, as you all go out and get mortgages and you're buying houses, you know 30% is a really important number because that's what you get qualified on to buy a home loan. If you're renting, it's also something that renters are looking at. So you really get a sense of what percentage of the population is really getting impacted here. And I think what's interesting is that as you look at places that we traditionally think as being high-cost markets like San Francisco, you see the percentage of people that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing is actually much less than here in Oroville and Butte County, which is compelling, I think, if nothing else. It's just an indication that nobody's kind of left untouched in this housing crisis, unfortunately. And so a lot of folks in communities like this one are spending a lot of their income, more than half the renters in the city are spending half their income or more than 30% of their income on housing. So it's an issue. And so what really changed are two particular things this current year. One is the state's looking for more accountability and to approve more housing units getting built. Okay, so that's the first thing that you'll see a lot of change around, and we'll talk about what that means. And the second is then reporting what is happening within each jurisdiction. There's a number of jurisdictions that you're not included in this list, by the way, that are not annually showing the progress on what housing activities they're doing. So there's two things. You have to produce housing, which is to approve housing, get housing units approved. We're not developers, of course, but you do control whether or not units get approved. And so the state's looking at that. At the same time, they're looking at then, are you reporting each year on how you're doing on that activity? You're doing well on the latter. You've been good on that for a number of years. So there's no problem with the reporting activities, although they're going to expand and get a little more complicated. But the city is among many communities that has not been able to produce sufficient housing. In fact, all but 12 jurisdictions in the entire state of California are in some degree of trouble because they could not produce enough housing. The vast majority of those are communities that could not produce enough market rate housing, or as it's called in the law, above moderate. But basically, that's what we would call them to be non-affordable or market rate housing. 377 jurisdictions, including Oroville, are in that category because in your current RENA requirements, you've not produced sufficient progress on that. Another 150 are communities that maybe have produced sufficient market rate housing but haven't produced enough affordable housing, particularly the low and very low income categories. And so as we said, so basically most jurisdictions are in this category. Now this is a little old data only because HCD hasn't updated it yet, so it could change in the next year or so, but we don't expect dramatic changes, obviously. So you are among virtually all communities in California that are impacted by this. Unfortunately, this is too small to read, so I'm just going to skip it. But basically, what we're talking about is streamlining as one of the remedies to deal with this. Well, what is streamlining? Like, we've heard about it, we've read about it. The state has some way to take local control away. What does exactly that mean? Well, quite simply, it is a mechanism that the state's put in place to allow for more multifamily development to seek approvals through communities. It doesn't apply to single-family subdivisions, but it does apply to multifamily projects. What it does generally is remove most local discretion on projects that don't comply with local zoning and design standards. So if you have situations where, I go back to that example of maximum density, while you may have a project, let's say, that was allowed to be built at 20 units per acre. If it's at 20 units per acre, but the city planning commissions, let's say, thought, well, on this site, we actually don't want to have that much height. We want to reduce it a little bit. That type of discretion, you really no longer have if a developer comes in and submits an application on that. It also reduces the parking standards for these multifamily projects to 1 per unit, so that's a significant change. There's no CEQA review, which means no environmental for those particular projects. And then probably for staff, look over at the staff table when I say this, but for staff there's some important impacts too, because now if a developer comes in and submits an application for a project, they have anywhere from 60 to 90 days to review it and let them know whether or not they meet the city's standards or not. If they don't, then respond within that time frame. Essentially those projects get approved by default. So that's a really hard time frame hard in terms of you can't go past it. There's no grace period. Not necessarily hard in terms of difficulty. I can't speak to that, but certainly if your community gets a lot of applications, that can be a real challenge. And then a 90 to 180 day period for the local government approval, which is zoning, design review, and those types of things. And when those local approvals are really being looked at, they're going to be considered based upon your existing zoning. So and your existing citywide design review guidelines. So, the city can't make arbitrary judgments on one particular project simply because they don't care for it, or it's not in the right particular design of what they would like to see on that street, unless they've got standards are in that place to deal with that issue. There are some exceptions. Some communities really won't see this, but those communities are extremely rural. Oroville is not certainly in that category, although some might think it's rural. It's certainly not. So there's a designation in the law about that of communities that really apply. So this might, at first you're thinking, wow, this sounds pretty devastating. Sounds like a lot of developers could come in and go crazy and start building. There are some impacts on development that come along with this. So if someone is going to take advantage of the streamlining process, first and foremost, unless they're building less than 10 units, they're going to have prevailing wage put on the project. So that would be an impact. They need to use a skilled workforce, which is basically union labor in many cases. To do that, the jurisdiction, as I mentioned, the time frame for review, those are things that we kind of talked about already. So there are some costs to the project, obviously, to get this done. And then, so what types of projects can get streamlined? Let's talk a little bit about that. The review process, as I mentioned at the beginning, communities that are subject to this are going to fall into category that they didn't produce enough market rate housing, or they didn't produce enough low-income housing. But the remedy, if you will, for addressing either one of those two is the same, and that is if a project has at least 10% affordable in that project, then they can get that approval. So even if you are a community that didn't produce enough market rate housing, that developer has to include at least 10% affordable in order to be eligible for the streamlining. So a developer can't come in and do a market rate project even though you're a community that didn't build enough market rate units. You have to do a mixed income. You have to do at least 10%. It would have to be affordable. A project could be entirely affordable and qualify for that. So it's a 10% minimum, just to be clear. You also, they have to have at least 2 units. It can't apply to, I think I talked about, it cannot apply to for sale projects. It's really a rental criteria. Ineligible projects, there are some situations where, particularly in sites where there are some significant constraints to development that can be dealt with. The state's made some very specific criteria for property or projects that wouldn't be eligible for this. Those are sites where there's tenants living in the property for the last 10 years, or projects that are currently mobile home or recreational parking or recreational vehicle sites. If there's historical structures on the property, those would not be subject to this. If it requires a subdivision of properties, that's not the case. So it's really about an infill. If you've got existing zoning that allows for something on that particular site, it's really, again, going to what we talked about earlier. Hazardous, if there's hazardous contamination on the site, and it's a little more prescriptive than that, but I won't get into the details on that. Coastal wetlands, designated prime farmlands are also in that situation as well. But for the most part, most communities are going to see a lot of property in this pool of property that's eligible for that particular type of streamlining. So I talked about the jurisdictions and the criteria. We just kind of recapping again. The developments, in your case, if you didn't produce enough, the streamline's eligible for projects that do at least 10% affordable. So if you have, in your case, not produced enough market rate housing, which is the why I've highlighted it in red, that's the situation where that could be triggered in this community. And again, there's 376 other communities that are in that same situation. There's also situations that if you had not produced enough extremely low or very low income housing, then as those projects come in at least 50%, you're not in that situation, but in some cases, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't see a project with more affordability come in and take advantage of this streamlining option. And then if you haven't submitted your annual progress report, we just mentioned that just because it's important to know that 232 jurisdictions in California have not been doing that. That's more than half. And what's, I would say, somewhat commendable to the city is you weren't even required legally to do it up until this past year, but you did it anyway because it helped you get grant funding for various things. And now those cities who were charter cities are now having to play catch up. You're not in that situation because you guys have been ahead of it. So credit to you guys on that. I want to talk about a couple of examples that some of us may have read about in the news about where this is happening already. There's two I think are probably very high profile in terms of scale, and that's probably why we'll talk about them briefly. Cupertino, the city of Cupertino has a Valco Mall. That has been a failed shopping center for a number of years. The city had looked at a number of different options with different developers. A developer came forward and proposed a mixed-use project, I think with a green deck, if I remember correctly, a few years ago. The neighbors got upset about it. They didn't care for the project. It went out to the vote, and eventually they overturned the project. But then SB 35 comes along, and so the developer now can come in and basically say, hey, look, this is allowed under your current zoning. You have to approve it. So we're going to submit an application for a streamlined approval with ministerial approval, which they did what they did, which in Cupertino's case, they'd have to do 50% of those would be affordable. So they're looking at 2,400 units in a project going to be built, with half of which 1,200 are going to be low income. And that project will likely get built because the city has limited, as I mentioned earlier, limited ability to influence, again, because it meets the criteria of the code. It's just wasn't really welcome within the community. Berkeley has a similar project, not nearly the same size. In this case, there was a local tribe that objected to the project. They didn't like it because they felt it was, I think, on or near lands that were sensitive to their community. And again, under SB 35, the developer came in under a streamlined permit, and 260 units are being proposed, of which 130 are going to be affordable to very low or low income households. Again, these are examples of the situation where they have to have that 50% criteria. Yours is only 10%. So if someone came in with at least 10%, that would be a situation you need to be prepared for. So there are some things that HC is doing right now to get ready for this. They've been doing some outreach to talk about these things, and they're developing some guidelines about how their annual reporting is going to be changing. I don't know that that's going to be a big factor for you all because you've been in front of it already, but we'll obviously want to make sure that we keep fulfilling that requirement. And I think it's important to understand the implications on the planning and entitlement process, first and foremost for you. You know, to be responsive is going to be critical at the staff level, because if something slips beyond that, let's say most projects are going to be 150 units or less in town. So if someone brings an application in, you have 60 days, the staff does, to turn around and get a response back to that developer to let them know whether or not it complies or not. If it doesn't, then it's assumed that staff agrees that it does. So that 60-day time frame is absolutely critical. So, you know, staff needs to be prepared for that. The second is, I think, like all communities, developing a strategy on how you're going to meet your arena needs, which may include mixed income, things of that sort. And then third is just to stay on top of the annual reporting duties of the city. There's no easy answers here. I get to be the messenger. I didn't create the legislation, so I can't be blamed for it, but I'm just trying to convey to you as a city that we've worked with how you might want to think about strategizing around this and that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council members have any questions? I would like a copy of your presentation, if you don't mind, if you could send it to Chief Lagrone, and so he can forward it to the council members.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
I did have a couple of questions, but
Yes, we applied for 2 years ago for low income or affordable housing, and we were denied the application because of one word. And this year, again, we applied and we were denied because the state withdrew its funding. So, you know, I feel a little frustrated in being presented with this when we have attempted and been refused. So I just want you to know that I feel frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I want to make sure that, you know, in response to that, the city does need to approve projects. You cannot guarantee that project's going to get built. You're not in the home building business, and no one is expecting that cities are in the home building business. So if for the most part, those approvals last for 3 years, they can be extended by another year, unless they're have a significant number of low-income units in them. So if you're approving projects, at least you're making progress in that. But that's something to be thinking about.
So I have a question about the 10% rule. Is this, so we have a couple of master plan communities that are on the books. Does this apply to the master plan communities if they take a section, let's say, of their 1,500 homes that they're building in their community and make a section of that 10% low to moderate low?
In terms of, well, there's
of dwelling units. You have
yeah, so
rental.
the streamlining is only for multifamily projects. So I'm assuming the master plan probably aren't multifamily projects. So those single-family master plan communities generally would not be subject to this requirement.
So it would just be the area for the multifamily.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your presentation. Moving on to item number 5, which is the hearing of non-agenda items. This is the time where the public can come forward, and we have a couple of people already. If you'd like to speak on a non-agenda item, you have up to 3 minutes if there's more than 10 speakers. If there's more than 10 speakers, we'll look at reducing that time. So the first person that we have is Bobby O'Reilly.
Good evening, Council, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask the city publicly for a recognition. I was reading some past posts recently, going through some old news articles and posts on Facebook pages, and I seen a post from July 4th, 2015, I think it was, where an OPD officer conducted a traffic stop, and during the course of that traffic stop, one officer was shot and one officer saved 2 other officers' lives. I'm asking that the city recognize the officer who saved the other officers' lives, as well as the officer that was shot in the line of, or during the course of his on-duty time for that incident. It would be greatly appreciated by myself if the city would look into that, and if the city cannot do that, then I will put on a public event myself for the individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Tasha Levinson.
I just wanted to let you know that the water study is now in draft form at LAFCO. It will be at this Thursday's meeting, 9 o'clock. If you go to Butte County LAFCO and go to item 4.2 on the agenda and click on it, you can actually see the draft study for yourself. It's only about 4 or 5 pages, 2 of which are taken up with rate comparisons, but there are 2 pages where they begin to touch on possibilities for saving, opportunities for savings, but I will say they barely skimmed on it, and I'm personally quite disappointed in that, but at the same time, this is our chance to see it. The biggest thing they missed, which is the same thing that Cal Water's own study, Dr. Sosa, also missed, was the fact that every 3 years Cal Water comes back for a rate increase, and usually a very significant rate increase. Last time in 2015, we beat them down off them, and what they wanted was roughly a 25 to 30% rate increase, and we got it down to about 3%. I think we are going to have to do that time and time and time again, because the one before that is the one that put us in the bind that we're in right now, and we are going to be living with that clearly forever. So we've got two water companies, Thermalito and South Feather, which have been stable through all of this, but Cal Water will keep coming in for the increases. But since I think it's important for our growth and development for any sort of housing, whether it be low income or regular, to have affordable water, I think we need to just really keep pressing on this to make sure we do what we can as a city to get affordable water. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasha.
It's the Butte County Board of Supervisors where they held those meetings, 9 o'clock this Thursday morning, item 4.2 on the agenda. And again, yes, you can see it online easily. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasha. Celia Hirschman, since you're talking about water also.
I am Celia Hirschman, Montgomery Street. I'm actually one of three people. The other person is, or one of three is Alan Young. Alan, myself, and Stephanie Towsley began our concern for the city of Oroville's water prices in 2012. We spent a year and a half. We enjoined the city. The city actually voted to enjoin our dispute with Cal Water, and we went to the California Public Utilities Commission to argue against this incredible rate increase. A year and a half with Mr. Scott Huber's help, although we wrote all the briefs ourselves and then he approved them. We were able to get that increase reduced for severely impoverished individuals. If you look at the report that was given, you will see just how poorly the Oroville legislature has represented the residents of Oroville over the last 10 years, 15 years. And it's no criticism on any of you. You asked for this study, and you have the opportunity to look into options to make it reasonable, because when you read this study, it becomes quite clear how unreasonable it is. The other thing I want to mention is, though the people who wrote this study are actually people who were contracted by Cal Water to do all the repair work, by the way, for years prior, North Star. But regardless of that, I'm sure they were fair and even-handed, but their caveats at the end are really misleading. And what Tasha says is absolutely true. I can't afford to go spend a year and a half of my life fighting again. It damn near killed me. And you don't want to have to pay an attorney to do that every 3 years. So I recommend you start looking at all the other cities who are protesting. And let me also say one more thing. Cal Water figured out that we weren't wrong in a lot of our arguments, and so they've enjoined 3 cities, Marysville, who also objected, and Oroville, who has the highest rates in this area, and Chico. So they've joined us all together now so that there'll be an average rate. So, and I plan on telling this to the supervisors tomorrow, the people who represent Chico should be very angry because their rates are going to go up because we have high water rates. It's time that the Oroville government look at this seriously and figure out what's right for the longevity and the growth of Oroville. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Spear.
Good evening, City Council.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and
speak into the microphone.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. And you know, the Bible says you have not because you ask not, and so I come to pray for wisdom and for provision. So Father God, we are grateful and thankful for our city, all the public servants, and thank you that you are always there. And Father, we pray for wisdom tonight for our city council, that your word says that if we ask, it will receive it generously without finding fault. So Father, give us wisdom to navigate, to lead our city into prosperity, into the way that you would have it go. We ask for your provision, Lord, that you would be our provider, that you would do miracles in our city. And Lord, we thank you that you have chosen us for such a time as this to make a difference. And so we lift up all our council members, Lord, and just pray for divine revelation. We lift up our police and our fire departments and all of the people that are the public servants. And in your word it says the greatest of all will be the servant of all. So we stand with them tonight. One city, Lord, bless our city. Pour out your blessings upon us. Guide us, direct us. Father, use us, Lord, to minister to the people that you have here, the homeless, that we're not going to run them off, that we will be the vessels that you use to make a place for them, for the people in the jail here, that you put the jail in Oroville for a reason, in the juvenile hall, Lord, that we would minister to the ones that need help, that need a hand up, that need some guidance, that need someone to speak into their lives. We love you. We praise you. We give you all the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. Item number 6, it's 6.1, 6.2, 3, 4, 5. I'd like to pull item 6.6, please. Anybody else have any items they want to pull? With item 6.6 pulled.
I move. Are you looking for a motion?
Mayor, there's a speaker card on 6.5.
Sorry. There is, sorry, with item 6.5 and 6.6 pulled.
I move that we approve the consent calendar, exempt item 6.5 and 6.6.
Second.
Is voting open?
Yes, voting's open.
All votes are in.
I voted my.
Yours is over here.
I'm voting Draper.
All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change their vote? Voting closed. Sorry, I thought those all said 6.6 on there. Okay, adopt resolution accepting grant funding from the Department of Alcohol Beverage Control. We have a speaker, Bill Spear.
Hello. I was looking through the agenda and I was looking at this item and I was reflecting on when the police came and gave their report of the amount of calls that they get and the responses and how short staffed they are. And it seems like a good a no-brainer. They're giving us $44,000 to do this, but the stuff that they're wanting to do, and it seems like it's not a very good deal when you start going over step by step. And if we were to take the money and not do everything that they're wanting to do, that'd be corrupt. And so if we're going to receive the money and limit our resources that we have, it doesn't seem very cost effective in the long run. Sure, the state's getting a good deal, and I know that it's money that gets collected already on the taxes, but for our city, one, they have to go for training, and the training, it seems like it's entrapment. It's I know it's a good idea to try to have people not selling liquor when they're not supposed to, but sending the police to go do a training on teaching them to entrap people when we have so much crime, you don't have to go to try to entrap anybody to fight crime. It's the phones are ringing off the hook. You can go do and the severity of the crime, trying to get somebody to do a crime when there's all kinds of serious crimes. There's burglaries and drug dealing, people right on the street, that you can go fight the crime right from the start. they'll release them right from the jail. They're not even the amount of cases that are being closed. It just seems, I mean, it looks good from the start, but in the long run, it looks like a lot of paperwork, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of wasted time of a police force that's already spread thin. I was seeing an article where we had to pay $400,000 because of a mistake that was made. When stuff comes through and we say, oh, that's a good idea, and we keep piling on more stuff and piling on more stuff and piling on more stuff. We need to start figuring out how we can take stuff off to free up the workers that are already overburdened to be able to concentrate on the job they have. Do less, but do it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I actually had a comment on this. I found it odd that it's only for alcohol and not any other type of drugs. So maybe, Chief, you could explain a little bit of that.
This money comes from the alcohol beverage control. It comes from licensees that pay for alcohol licenses. It is a serious crime. It is nothing to diminish or to minimize or anything else. It has significant impacts in the community when you have drunkards and you have individuals that run establishments that are not running quality establishments, and these things are ending up in young people's hands. So it is not, I'm sorry, I don't even know where to begin on the comments that were just made. I mean, I think that they missed the point, I mean, in my opinion. But it is a significant issue. It is a significant investment by alcohol beverage control into this community. This is done on overtime. The individuals come in, it's paid for by the state to ensure that the licensees are policed appropriately. It is not entrapment. It's not even close to entrapment. It shouldn't even be characterized as that. They are not sent anywhere to be trained on how to entrap people. There is a long-standing history that goes with this, that this department has partnered with this agency to enforce these laws. And I would hate to think of what they would be when you have establishments, licensed establishments that are not policed and know they're not policed.
Okay, thank you.
We also, just one little thing to throw on there too, we are also including tobacco stings with this as well, because I know the tobacco folks came here and they asked us to do that, and we did not take the money because we knew it wouldn't be something that we could do. So the council did pass on that. However, one of the things that I thought was important was that we also look at that to make sure that tobacco isn't ending up in the hands of children.
Well, I was thinking more about the drugs that are being sold around these environments also.
Any crime that's occurring when they're there is handled. If they're selling some other drugs, whether it be methamphetamine, heroin, marijuana, whatever it may be, I don't even want to talk about that one particular issue, but I mean, it's just a difficult issue right now because the state and the feds and everybody else has so convoluted the landscape that it's a very difficult issue.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments on item 6.5? Looking for a motion.
I move that we adopt resolution number 8703.
Second.
All votes, almost all votes are in. All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change their vote? Voting closed. Thank you.
Motion passes.
Moving on to item 6.6, approve letter of support for display of city logo on Haven of Hope on Wheels advertising as directed by council on May 15th, 2018. We do have public speakers on this, but I'm going to speak to this first. I actually listened to the meeting when I was at my conference, and I was surprised that Councilmember Draper asked how come the logo was missing on the advertisement, because she sits on the continuum of care, and they actually did a presentation there, and this logo had actually been on all of the printed materials. Mr. Thompson had presented it to SCORE, and it was brought up to the city attorney that the logo was being used without the permission of the city. And so for the council to be surprised, each and every one of us had one of these in our mailbox. We had just received emails for a fundraising dinner. So it was something that was being used without the permission of the city, hence why it's there now. And I just found it really unfortunate that some council members knew of this and didn't do anything about it, but yet Councilmember Thompson, our own very council member, had a video taken with him in a public building with the city seal behind him, and the same council members turned him into the FPPC because the picture of the city council logo was behind him in that video. So this has nothing to do with the fact that the logo was on this process or this Wheels of Hope. It has to do with how it was phrased and how it was used. They didn't have the permission to use it. And everybody needs the permission to use it. And our council, our city attorney, had asked them 2 or 3 times to remove it, and it wasn't done. So it's at nobody's fault, but it needs to be brought to the attention that this had happened for almost 3 months, and nobody did anything about it. So I wasn't here, but I watched the meeting. I would have said something then. I'm saying it now just to bring it to the public's notice that if you want to use the city seal, you need permission to do it. If your very own council members can't even have a picture taken in a public building with the city seal behind them without fear of being turned in, the public doesn't have the right to use it at random either. Thank you. We do have speakers on this. Tasha Levinson and Bobby O'Reilly.
Well, I want to thank you for putting the letter on here that will authorize the use of this seal, because I think it's an excellent project and I think it's very good, and I think it is something that can offer a lot of hope. I'm not going to even speak to the other reference that you made, because I think that all that is doing is engendering unnecessary anger, which I'm just going to leave alone. The other thing I am going to say is that I noticed the budget's on the calendar today, and one of the things that I know that we tried to do before, and I hope will happen in the future, is that all of the earmarked funds will have much broader descriptions.
Madam Mayor, this is not on topic.
Well, it actually is on topic.
This item is not on topic. This item can be brought at your next agenda item, but this is only related to the city seal project or topic.
Well, it related to the Haven of Hope, which is I would like to at some point be able to look to grants from from earmarked funds, and so I'm just hoping that the descriptions can be broad enough so people can see what grants are applicable. That's all I was trying to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bobby O'Reilly.
Good evening again, thank you. So the words were taken right out of my mouth. I actually have it written as I wrote when I came in and did my card, that I find it quite odd that there is now a agenda topic on the agenda to add the city logo to this, when, as I also was going to state, a council member got in trouble for having it in a video that wasn't, the way I interpret it, wasn't intentional of having in the video. And so that was words taken right out of my mouth. I appreciate that. I don't understand why the city logo needs to go on something that the city's not funding. As far as I understand, this isn't a city-funded project. It's a private sector, and they're doing donations for the supplies and so forth. So I don't understand why the city logo should go on to the project if the city's not funding the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on item number 6.6? Looking for a motion.
I think actually I thought they were closing the public comment before the council, because I'd like to say a few things.
It was on the consent agenda.
Oh, okay.
Do you want?
Yeah, I have a few things. Number one, I want to publicly say that nobody got in trouble. There were just people who had issues with it. Number two is just a question for our, I'm all in favor. I think this is a great endeavor to help out people who need a shower and place to clean. So I think it's a great opportunity. My question is in regards to legal liability in regards to, I'm not sure the history of the city going into legally approving the use of the city logo for private activities or nonprofit activities. I'm not sure exactly which the venture is, but I don't know the history of that, nor the possibility of potential liability that might open up to the city. I'm just a question, does that open up the city to liabilities if we per se approve this project and then another project comes in, we decide to not approve the seal? Is that an issue that we might face?
The problem arises when there's no blessing by the council. When there is a blessing by the council, the idea is that the people are being expressed through their council, and so if you lend your support to one but not another, that's a normal political decision. That's not a violation of somebody's rights. So if you do decide to allow people to use the seal for charitable purposes, then there would not be a problem. The problem could arise if you have a purely religious organization, and now all of a sudden we have to deal with the appearance of an establishment of a religion, and we have a First Amendment provision that prohibits the establishment of religion, government participation, but I don't believe that's what's happening here. So generally speaking, you have the right to allow people to use your logo, but it's at your discretion, and the key is that you have to bless it. And once you do, it's a political decision like any other decision you make, and if someone is unhappy with it, you ultimately are all elected officials.
Okay. I move that we approve a letter of support for the display of the city logo on the Haven of Hope on Wheels.
Is there any other questions or comments before we open this up for vote? Thank you. Go ahead.
I move that we approve the letter of support.
I second.
First and second, voting's open. All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change? Voting closed. Moving on to public hearings, we have a public hearing.
The motion carries.
Thank you. We have a public hearing this evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. We have James Hamill here with CSCDA to conduct the public hearing for the TEFRA resolution for the issuance of tax bonds for the Sierra Heights Senior Apartments.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is James Hamill. I'm a managing director with CSCDA. We're here tonight. We were here about a year ago for the same project to conduct the TEFRA hearing. This is really a public accountability requirement that's required under the Internal Revenue Code and under the Joint Powers Authority that you are a member to. Two important points to point out. Number one is the city is not liable for these bonds. These are direct obligations of the developer themselves for the project itself. And number two, the city is not named in any bond documents, so there's no liability to the city in that respect at all. So this is really just a public accountability requirement, and I can answer any questions. We do have Davis Lockert from the developer here also to answer any questions you may have on the project.
Is there any other, I'm going to open this up for public hearing at this time. This is a public hearing on item 7.1, issuance of the revenue bonds for Sierra Heights Apartment. If there's anybody in the public that wishes to speak, now's your time. Anybody? Seeing none, I'm going to close public hearing on item number 7.1 on the agenda this evening. Any questions or comments from the council? Is that a yes? I don't have a screen up here, so I can't see my names anymore. So what do I do? Okay. Looking, there is none. Looking for a motion?
I move that we adopt resolution number 8702.
Who was the second on that one?
There's a first and second.
Second is Councilman Hatley.
Okay, thank you.
Since you made the second, can you vote? All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change their vote? Voting closed.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7.2, preliminary budget for 2018, 2019. Who's speaking on this? Would that be Ruth or Bill?
Sure.
Am I moving too fast for you, Miss Chief Legrone?
Major changes from last year's budget to this budget. We had a increase in our unfunded liability of about $364,000. We had increases in workman's comp rates, $220,000. We had a lot of claims last year, and so we have to replenish our funds, so they increased our contribution. So those two items alone are costing us about $600,000 this year. We do have a reduced staff, so we're saving money there. We did put in, that we didn't have last year, we did put in a $150,000 budget for a city administrator, not knowing where that was going to land, so we possibly could have some savings there. We didn't have a city administrator in the budget last year. We had a tiny portion of Don's salary in there. We also absorbed in the general fund, we absorbed all of code enforcement back because that grant ran out. So we were having partial salaries of some of our general fund staff being paid out of the grant funds that are no longer able to draw on that grant anymore. So the general fund did absorb a little bit of those code enforcement activities.
So, Ruth, how many MLEs do we have now?
I think we have 4.
And so they're being funded in the general fund?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, but we have budgeted for more. We just have some vacancies because I believe 2 moved up into the police officers. But we have more funded.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other changes, we don't have any, we have a half of a counter person budgeted in planning. So we went ahead and budgeted something there for a planning consultant. So if in case we need help, we have a budget to seek outside services for planning. We do have a possible litigation item that we're watching, trying to find a way to fund that in case it doesn't go our way. We froze the assistant police officer and we added a regular police officer. So those are basically the major changes. I do want to address that our budget is very lean. Our goal was to just get it done on time. I know there's a lot of things that you could do to make it better. You could put in performance measures, you can put in pictures, you can put in goals and objectives. But at this point, it was just a wanting to get it done and wanting to get it done on time and concentrating on the numbers. Another thing I want to mention is that we don't have our health insurance rate increases yet. So the range was given to us at 4 to 7%. We put it in at 7 because we don't know. Mm-hmm. So that was another big thing. So if we get the rates before the adopted budget, I'll be letting you know how much that's going to be. Maybe it could be a savings if it comes in at 4%. So I'll let you know in a month when we bring our adopted budget forward.
Can you tell me what's going on with the front counter person? I believe that we no longer have that position filled. Has that been budgeted for?
Maybe the personnel officer might be able to speak to that.
I think that's still me. Right now, that position was filled by a program through the county, which is called Welfare to Work. The individual found full-time work somewhere that was a permanent job and took that position. That position is not funded in the budget. It was not funded previously in the budget. It was done through that program. I know that the HR manager is diligently working on finding somebody from that program to refill that position.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Ruth, maybe I missed it, maybe you covered it. On some of the positions that were partially funded from the general fund and were funded by other,
Yes.
Did you cover that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that now 100% of that is coming out of the general fund rather than being broken into several pieces. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to cover a couple things, Madam Mayor, if I can.
You go right ahead, but you need to speak up into your microphone.
I'll pull it right here in front of me. One of the things I like to bring to the council's attention and also the communities is that in fiscal year 17-18, the city had a budget for benefits and wages that was $8,400,000. This year, in this upcoming fiscal year in 18-19, that budget is now $7,687,000. There's been a reduction in that by about $713,000. So the council and the city has worked very hard to reduce that. They continue to do that, and the budget is in that area downward trending. That has come at a cost, though. That cost is diminished staffing through attrition, people leaving, or just not filling jobs that we had previously had. We are down to 90 employees from 147. The budget will tell you we have 97. You are considered 7 employees. So you are other 7. So we are at 97 with our council. So we've lost approximately 1/3 of our workforce. In doing that, we've also lost positions that were critical to the city when we have people that are working out of class. Those out of class positions are no longer allowed by PERS. If you're going to be in them for more than 6 months, then the city or the employer is required to make some sort of change if that is an open position that the city is advertising to fill in another capacity. That has caused a uptick in workload for individuals, in liability for the city, because we have people that are supervising and managing that aren't really necessarily supervisors or managers. They've just been kind of pushed into that position. They're all good people. They all care very much about this city and about this community, and they're doing the best that they can with what they have. So a few things that were not included in the budget that the staff still needs direction on from the council is the out-of-class positions that exist right now. Right now there are 4 positions, and what we're looking for is direction from the council. Would you like us to bring that back in the budget? Would you like to not include that in the budget? Or would you like us to delay this decision until such time as a new permanent city administrator is hired for the city?
I think the decision should be delayed until we have a city administrator and then bring it back.
I'm in agreement.
I think it's hard to make that decision just right here, but I think if you know, we have a new city administrator possibly coming, that that's probably would be helpful. You know, we all know the budget is a moving target, so you know, getting it done on time doesn't mean it's not going to change 2 weeks from now. So
the budget changes honestly from day to day. I mean, it's a living document that has to. The real truth is, you want to know about your economic health for your city is you look at your actuals. I mean, you look at what your revenues and what your expenditures were for prior years and where they closed at, and that will tell you if you're spending more than you're earning.
Well, I certainly agree that we can't continue to work people out of class, and I know PERS has changed a little bit. Like you said, the vacant, they have to be advertised vacant positions. You can't backfill them into that job for an indefinite period of time. And I do know that people are working 2 and 3 jobs here, so it's. But on the other side of that is we've asked everybody else for a 10% pay cut. So I think it'd be wise of us to just wait until a city administrator comes and fills the shoes, that, you know, that between Ruth and you guys can take a look at that and see what the best avenue is for us to go and what we can do legally, as Derek has talked to us about that too. So I think just hold off on that. Is that the consensus of the council?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Council. I'd also like to thank Ruth and her staff for preparing this budget. Our goal this year was to do this with as little chaos and gnashing of teeth and trouble that we did, and I think that, you know, they performed extremely well on this. It's a very difficult budget. Ruth lives, eats, and breathes this thing. It makes her sick, so she's doing an excellent job, in my opinion, managing it. It's a very difficult thing to manage. I just want to publicly thank her for the hard work and the many hours that she put in, and she was still able to get her son married during this same time frame. So I also like to congratulate him.
Congratulations,
Thank
Ruth.
you.
How was the wedding?
It was awesome.
Good. Off topic. Sorry, Derek. Okay. Any other questions or comments or
I have a question.
conduct a public hearing? Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
It says conduct a public hearing here. This is a public hearing. Okay. This is a public hearing. I didn't catch that. So this is I'm sorry, this is something else we'll have to talk about on this new agenda. I didn't catch that was a public hearing. This is a public hearing. If anybody, I do have one, no I don't. If anybody likes to speak on item number 7.2, now's your chance. I'm opening this up for public hearing. Anybody? Anybody? Public hearing is closed on item 7.2. Looking to pass direction. Is this a vote?
Nope, direction.
I think Janet had a question.
You know, let me.
Agenda item is simply to give direction
to staff.
Public input, so there's no item to the.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can ask the chief later.
Okay.
Do you have a question, Janet? Or are you going to ask later?
Chief, you and I had a conversation a couple of days ago, and I just mentioned briefly code enforcement.
Yes.
And you mentioned something in regards to it. It is now being taken out of another fund, and I don't know what that fund is.
It's currently now funded through the general fund, and it is being operated out of the public safety budget.
Public safety. Thank you.
Was there something else?
No.
Okay. We're moving off of item 7.2 and we're moving on to item 7.3, and this is also a public hearing. Appropriation limits for 2018-2019 budget.
This item is something that the state requires us to do every year. They set a appropriations limit that we cannot go over, and the limit is $41 million, and we're well under that. So we're fine, but we have to go through the motions, and maybe Derek could add more to that if he wants to.
No, this is ultimately what we call the GAN limit, and it's a complicated history, but it goes back to the Proposition 13 era. This is something that all cities have to adopt every year, and I have nothing more to add that our finance director hasn't.
Okay, any other questions or comments for item number 7.3 before I open it for public hearing? Okay.
7.2.
7.3?
7.3, thank you.
This is a public hearing. Does anybody have any? I'm going to open this for public hearing. Speak now.
Thank you.
Public hearing is closed on item
together.
7.3. Looking for a motion?
Motion.
Move we adopt resolution 8705.
A second.
First and second, voting's open.
Oh, I did. Do you need to vote?
All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change? Voting closed.
Motion carries
Yahoo.
unanimously.
Now we're on to regular business. This feels better. Regular business, 8.1, 10th Amendment to the Supplemental Benefits Fund Agreement with the California Department of Water Resources.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Dawn Nevers, SBF Program Specialist with the City of Oroville. Annually since 2013, DWR has requested an amendment of the Supplemental Benefits Fund Implementation Agreement with DWR for a 1-year period pending the final approval of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, Project 2100. As of today, the license approval remains pending. DWR has requested the city approve a 10th amendment of the standard agreement, which will extend the term for 12 additional months. The term of the original agreement and the terms of each previously approved amendments will remain in place unchanged. Staff is recommending approval of Resolution 8706, amending the SBF implementation agreement with DWR, extending the terms of the agreement through July 5th, 2019. Are there any questions?
Any questions or comments? Looking for a motion.
I move that we adopt resolution number 8706.
A second.
8706.
First and second. Voting will be open once the last vote's cleared.
There you go.
All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change their vote? Voting closed. Moving on to 8.
That motion carries 5-2.
4-2.
4-2. 4-2 and 1 absent. Yeah.
8.2, request for annexation for proposed county area industrial park located at 4801 Feather River Boulevard and 461 Ophir Road.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. What you have before you today is just the staff is looking for direction if you would like to move forward on this annexation and take it to a consultant, essentially, or a contractor that can actually do the annexation for us. What the staff report provides is just a little background. The property owner has approached the city, our city personnel, and requested that their property be joined into the city. What the properties we're talking about is the old Louisiana Pacific Mill on Feather River Boulevard. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but there was a trap and skeet club at the corner of Ophir Road and I believe it's Baggett Marysville, across the street from the Work Training Center, the Frock operation up there. One is 103 acres, one is 110 acres. The one property on Ophir Road has a single family dwelling on it, and that is all that is on the property. It is bare land other than that. The property located at 4801 Feather River Boulevard is an industrial complex. The intent of the complex would be the same as it currently is right now. It would be industrial manufacturing. We would not be looking at changing the zoning or anything like that, so whatever activities are allowed there now would be allowed to continue to go on in that facility. We're not looking for direction to do an annexation or process an annexation. We're wanting to know, are you interested in hearing this at this point and going further with this? I'm willing to provide any more information that I can about the property. I have talked with the property owner. The property owner also has property across the highway and has expressed that the reason that he is not interested in an annexation on the other side of the highway is because he is concerned that it would adversely impact his neighbors, and he wants to be conscientious of them at this time. So where he's at now, neither one of these properties, the one on Ophir actually butts up against city-owned property. The one on Feather River Boulevard, there are no other businesses or any other facilities on there. It's also bare land.
I have a question.
Go ahead, and then I'll
What is the benefit to the owner, and what is the benefit to the city to go ahead and annex this?
I think the benefit to the city is that whatever points of sale that occur on that property are now in the city, and those points of sale will be part of the tax base for the city of Oroville. Right. As far as the owner, it now gains access to having, I guess, say in the city where they're at. They're butt up against it right now, but really don't have a whole lot other than that. Right now they are serviced by Cal Water at 4801 Feather River Boulevard and South Feather Power and Water. If we annex them into the city, I believe if they would like to pay for it at their expense, they can now join the city sewer system, if that is something that they choose to do and the SCORE has the capacity. I'm not sure if SCORE can handle something quite that size, but that would be something that they would have to negotiate with that. And I believe that's the main benefits for both sides.
Thank you.
So with this, is he looking for the city to pay for this annexation, or is he willing to front the full cost of the annexation?
I did approach that question with him, and at the time I didn't have an exact number, and I could not give him one. And being that he is a businessman, a very successful businessman, he didn't want to have that conversation until we knew what the number was. So what he told me is that he's absolutely willing to entertain the conversation and negotiate this price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's my understanding that it does say the property owner is willing to meet and discuss the potential cost of sharing for the annexation.
Right.
Correct.
So it's negotiable.
So, I mean, it's kind of like the elephant in the room of why he wants it annexed in.
So
It's a large
Any
commercial.
answer I would give you would be speculation, but I think
Right. And anyway, so, you know, I personally, and I know the owner, nice guy, is a friend and supporter of mine, but he also knows where I stand on that issue. So in regards to city funding annexation for potential lots of money being made in his facility, I think it'd be probably best that he, you know, front the cost if it was to be annexed.
And if that's one of the conditions of the council, we can certainly, as we go back to negotiate, just say that is one of the conditions.
well, I got a few things I'm going to add to this. So does anybody else have anything? Jack, you had something you wanted to say.
The picture that we had there is blurry, to say the least. But I know it's in an area that I'm familiar with because of the toxic Superfund site there, Coppers. And as you know, water runs downhill, and that would be toward the river. One of the concerns I had, I'm not sure if this area right here is clear, but the apex of this or corner here, there used to be, and maybe still is, a pond there. And the toxicity of that pond was beyond belief. And that was many years ago. This area here. I'm not sure if it would be in our best interest to get into it before we had an appraisal done on the quality of the ground, and to make sure that we weren't biting off a major problem here.
We can certainly check with our consultants and see if that is an issue. We are not purchasing or owning or have any ownership in this. They are just becoming in the city boundaries now. I don't believe we would have any liability. I know the pond you're talking about. It's a little bit further to the south. I have a color copy, so it's the outcropping of trees is where that pond is at. But you know, we can certainly check with the Brownsfield folks and make sure that I think he may have even had a phase 1 done on that property. I'm not for sure though. But
That was just a big concern of mine, knowing the area there and what little the state has done to help us out and clean it up. I was really concerned because they more or less just turned it over to us to fix, and they haven't given any help whatsoever. But I would want to investigate that a little better. Otherwise, I'm not opposed to it.
Thank you. I will.
And just to add, I'm sorry, you want to say something, but just to add in regards to my previous comments, and I'm a huge proponent and in favor of annexation. We have an annexation plan that we have here, and there are other areas of Oroville where our funds need to go towards in regards to annexation. For example, you know, Thermalito, you have an area out where I live I drive through county to get to my area that's city. And so we have this area that's surrounded in Thermalito that's got city all around it. And we, you know, these are areas that we still need to go towards to annex. So I see those as higher priorities instead of spending money for this one.
How I would answer that for you is you cannot annex areas like you're talking about if you don't annex areas like this, because you have to pay for those somehow. Residential areas don't pay for themselves. So whatever commercial manufacturing that may be going on there, it's, you know, you want to be looking for the revenue also to pay for the other side of that. So I think it's a combination of things, Councilman Thompson, that you do them in lockstep. Yes, ma'am.
So I've got a map here of Rio del Oro, which has been on the books for several years. And Steve Seidenglanz's property, that's who we're talking about, is the property owned by Steve Seidenglanz in the industrial park, which I know Steve too, has held up our city and the Rio del Oro because the property that's in question, he wanted to make sure that he was going to come out ahead if he was going to annex into the city. And so well over 10 years that I have been working on this, even on the chamber, before I came to city council, this was a no-go. And by not wanting to do the other side, Rio del Oro can't be annexed into the city. So almost single-handedly it's been held up. So you want to talk about what's good for our community. What's good for our community is to annex all of it. Unfortunately, at this time, the only reason that this is even coming to the plate is because we have marijuana on the agenda. And I am not in favor of moving forward with something that is so self-serving as one parcel for that benefit. Now, if they want to look at other parcels, and then you look at the map, because I sit on LAFCO, you actually end up surrounding this other parcel, where'd that picture go? Another parcel by almost 75%. So it's an automatic take on that. That person that owns the other parcel, unless it's not marked correctly, this parcel right here, LAFCO doesn't allow things like that.
This is not a representation of what the property would look like. I made this map. I am not a planner. I drew it just to represent this is the property. And as we get professional planners,
on this map it shows the same thing. And all of this area over here, he owns portions of this, all but except a few, he has said no to. So unless we make a better deal for the broader community, I'm not going to support this. And the two pieces that he wants to annex is, like you said, right out of your mouth, we're not going to change the zoning on it. Well, what that says, he's free to have exactly, and frankly, as Councilmember Berry said, you want to have marijuana seed to sale in there and use contaminated water or over sites that have brownfield issues with them. I personally don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be responsible for what's going to happen with the stuff that is sold out of our community, if it comes to be, for what's coming out of there and contaminated. And frankly, this just all stinks like a skunk. So that's how it's just, and we can do better than this. And I am all for annexing the right properties. And if we're going to annex, we need to pull out the annexation plans that we had for the commercial area and do the whole thing or not do any of it. Because doing one piece for the sole purpose of one landowner to make money is not the right thing for the city of Oroville. That's how it's just, and we have an annexation package that was already created for this area, and that's what we need to go after. Because if it's fair for one person, it's fair for all.
So I'm looking at this, and my question is, there's two separate
parcels.
There's two separate parcels. We're looking at Louisiana Pacific, where they used to customize boats, right? And then
one of the after purposes from the lumber mill was, yes, they had a boat repair facility.
So the other property is just an extension. what is the potential of just annexing Louisiana Pacific?
If the council gives that direction, we can go back to the property owner and find out if that is something that they're interested in. The property owner, as it was presented to staff at the time, is interested in both pieces of property.
So, anybody here know any history of the Louisiana Pacific property?
What would you like to know?
Well, I mean, what did they have on it? What
It was a
kind of
lumber mill.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it was a big
And
log deck. It was the industry that when it died, Oroville also went stagnant.
So, the ground is contaminated.
They were, I don't, not necessarily. Coppers that was behind them was the ones that was treating the logs with creosote that got into the ground and contaminated
Right.
the ground. That's the Superfund site. Louisiana
Right.
Pacific was nothing more than a log deck. They'd bring in timber in big piles and they'd cut it up into wood.
I would
That's
just
a
be
difference.
concerned.
Sure.
I mean, to
I mean,
me,
they're-
the properties need to be looked into.
Right.
So,
We can certainly ask that they conduct some sort of a Brownsfield phase 1. I don't think phase 2 for lead would be necessary.
Rio Del Oro, Side and Glance's properties, and this is the only one he wants.
I don't think Rio de Oro is even a project anymore. It's for sale at this point.
Well, it's because we stalled it for so long if it is. Because the city, because we had this issue with the annexation. 2,700 homes. And they've tried for over 10 years. Decent people. But it's unfortunate.
It's the sewer that held it up.
Any other questions or comments on item number 8.2? We actually have a speaker. Thank you, Mr. Legrone.
Thank you, Madam
Am
Mayor.
I calling you chief when you stand up?
It doesn't matter.
Chief Legrone. Bobby O'Reilly. Item 8.2 on the agenda.
Thank you once again for the final time this evening to speak on the agenda. I also agree that with somebody holding up forward movement for the better of the community for so long, and then when the subject of marijuana and the foreseeking of all this great fortune to come out of the process, and all of a sudden somebody wants to individualize, I'll sell this one and this one, but not the ones around it and not the other ones I own, but just this one and this one. That tells you they already have somebody in place to grow marijuana, process marijuana, manufacture marijuana. All of a sudden, and what better locations to do it in than where it's already zoned. Also, just a quick correction, if I heard it correctly, I believe Chief Administrator said that the old Louisiana Pacific was vacant. It is not vacant. There are many businesses within that facility. There is a car lot directly out front. There is California Hot Logs in there. There is a recycling facility in there. There are multiple entities going on within the Louisiana Pacific property. Again, I don't feel, as the mayor said it best, I don't feel that the monetary gain of one greedy individual in this town is to better the community. I don't think this is right at all.
Mayor, I have had one more card turned in.
Oh,
And this is from Celia Hirschman.
so yeah.
Hi. I haven't been to a lot of city council meetings recently, but I'm a little surprised at all the partisanship. This should be about what helps the community. And I just heard a few minutes ago about how small our staff is, about how we've had to cut things. And it's a good thing you didn't ask me what to cut, because I have my own opinion. But the fact is that I don't care if someone wants to annex into the community, as long as it's safe ground, go for it. This is the last thing we should be arguing about right now. if the issue is about marijuana, and it sounds like it is, let's not pretend and make it about annexation. If someone wants to annex into this community and that's going to bring tax revenue here, come on. You tell me, you explain to me how that's a no. That is not a no. Not when everybody just took pay cuts. That's crazy. If it's about marijuana, fine. That's a different decision, and you all get to make that decision. You have a vote. Otherwise, this is real partisan politics, and that's not serving this community.
Anybody else? Item number 8.2. I think there's too much information left unclear on some of the issues with the property. So
that would come with the, Madam Mayor, with the, if the council were to authorize to proceed, that would come back at that point. This is just merely, do you want to move forward and proceed exploring this issue? We're not approving anything, making any final decision. It's essentially what we're looking for is direction, whether you want professional planning staff to look at this or to drop the issue.
I want that, if I want to move forward on this, it's the annexation package that was drawn up for the whole region would be my recommendation.
I myself, all I was concerned about was the groundwater and the contamination there over the years, because we've witnessed a lot of it there. But other than that, if they can, show that it's clear, not contaminated anymore, we can move forward with the annexation, looking into it as far as it.
I recently toured this site, and he has the ability to generate water, or he has piping all around for water. And if that water is near the site of Coppers, I am also concerned about the quality of that water. So along with the ground, I would want to make sure that the water is safe there if they're going to be producing or growing anything there.
Anybody else?
I'm in agreement. I'm in favor of following through and getting some particulars on the site.
I have to agree. We need to look at everything, and there are some businesses in that structure now, and again, it's industrial property. The other side, we can't compete with the county on the other side of the freeway, and that owner doesn't own all that property clear up to that housing project that was never going to go in anybody's lifetime. You could add all of our lives together right now and you still won't see that project. So to me, one side doesn't mean anything. I don't the other side, yeah, it'd be nice to have it because there are businesses over there, but the deal that that individual has with the county, we cannot match any way, shape, or form. And so if we can get this portion into the city, I have to agree. I think we need to move forward on it and start that process and look at it.
You got enough? Move forward. Okay. It's not a vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
8.3. Well, I don't know. You had 3.
You had 4.
Oh, 4? Okay. 8.3, letter of support for Butte County's 2018 proposed basin boundary modification. Council action requested. They want a letter. Who's reporting on this?
I am. Council members, Dawn Nevers again, City of Oroville. Following the presentation I gave on May 1st, updating the council on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in the East Butte Subbasin and the Wyandotte Creek Subbasins, I received a request for a letter of support from the City of Oroville for Butte County's proposed 2018 basin boundary modification. The boundary modification will incorporate a portion of the East Butte Subbasin into the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. Consolidating subbasins within the Oroville area would reduce potential geopolitical complexities and enhance effective and efficient management of groundwater in the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. Staff is requesting approval of the letter of support for Butte County's proposed 2018 basin boundary modification to incorporate a portion of the East Butte Subbasin within the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. Are there any questions?
Nope, we've been through this one. Any other questions or comments?
I would approve the letter with the correction in the third paragraph, Oroville. Spelled wrong.
The capital R. Yeah, we can correct
Looking
that.
for a second? First and second, voting's open. All votes are in. Does anybody wish to change? Voting closed.
That motion carries unanimously.
Perfect. Okay, moving on to council and committee reports. Any council or committee reports? Well, I served my last LAFCO meeting last month. So tomorrow, Tasha, I will not be sitting at LAFCO, but a few years ago, we did, as well as we could with the mayors that were at the annual mayor committee there, say that we think that it should be a rotating position. Oroville had not had a seat on there for almost 20 years. And so I was the first in about 20 years to have a seat. And out of respect for all the other cities, which are Biggs and Gridley, and Chico, because Chico had typically had a seat on there, we decided to rotate it. And I was really impressed with the vice mayor, not the mayor of Chico was there. I think he was there, Sean Morgan, yeah, Morgan. Who's the mayor?
Sean.
No, it wasn't him. It was somebody.
Oh, at the time?
Yeah.
Was
So anyway.
Scott Grundle?
No, it was somebody else. But anyway, so we appointed Biggs. I think Biggs or Gridley is going to be taking the seat, which I think is a great opportunity for the other cities to be on there. But it's kind of tough to come up to speed. So hopefully they'll have good mentors and. But anyway, so that's that.
It's in the books.
So it's one committee down.
We'll think of something.
What happens? Well, we do get represented as a whole because LAFCO is very complex. It looks at the greater region, like annexations and stuff and LAFCO makes the criteria. The criteria, for example, used to be you couldn't have keyhole annexations. In other words, you couldn't frog jump, but if you had surrounded properties that were surrounded by 71 or 76%. So example, when looking at this, when you look at this and this yellow piece of property here, he wants in, but it surrounds this property by 75%, they don't like that. So you have to either, if this were an emergency sewer issue, like a homeowner emergency sewer issue, you could do that. In a situation like this, this should come up at LAFCO as an issue. But now we've reduced it to 51%, which with us in the city of Oroville, it's to clean up your lines. And so that's why we were able to do so much in the past. And, but we haven't gone through and looked at the 51% yet, which if we were fully staffed, we'd have the opportunity to do that. I know that Linda Draper sits on the continuum of care, and one of the topics have been, because I've been contacted by the board there, and also that there have been some grants, because it came up that there were grants that we didn't, that we could have applied for that we didn't. And so it becomes really important that the committee members that sit on those committees, when they get the emails, to pass them on, or if they hear something like this, to pass it on. Whether or not that information was passed on to Linda or not is becoming the question in general, just that making sure that the city administrator and other people are on the chain, are the alternative, because we've had such turnover if it goes to the help desk or if it goes to, so I know I talked to him about putting the chief on and other, you know, I don't necessarily need to be on there. You can't have too many council members on there, but at least even putting Amy on there. So, any other committees? You huffed out loud over there. I said you huffed out loud. Anybody else?
We're in between committee meetings right now.
Okay.
You know, they come like this in a cluster.
All right. City administration?
I just have a couple things, Madam Mayor. We are currently working with a very excellent group of individuals, the Rotary, Kiwanis, Exchange Club, Councilman Thompson, Vice Mayor, Gary Lehman, several
Wade.
I'm sorry.
Wade Atterbury.
Wade Atterbury. What we're working on is a project at the Boy Scouts, or the Scouts building on Safford Avenue. There, we are looking to raise money to do the necessary repairs down there with the Scouts. The Scouts are putting on a fundraiser. It's going to be a pancake breakfast, and I believe it's June 30th. Is that correct?
June 30th, 8 to 11 a.m.
Right. So we're asking everybody to come out and enjoy that if they can, and support that. It's a worthy issue. The Scouts are going to be putting in a lot of the manual labor themselves to give back to their building. So we've been working on that. We recently have met with the Continuum of Care, have a better understanding now of what the barriers were for our local agencies and also for ourselves. So with the new manager, I believe she's manager administrator.
Jennifer Briggs.
Yes, she has been, was very informative, and I hope to carve out a better relationship with them and to bring more resources to our community to address the issue as it currently exists. I have some bad news that I need to share with all 7 of you. It's not, I mean, the public can hang around if they like, but we need to go back into closed session for like 5 minutes. I need to share one more thing with you. The last thing that I need to bring to council is on the 14th of June, between 2 and 5 p.m. We are going to be having the SCI is going to be holding their stakeholders meeting. I am currently looking for individuals who would like to be part of that and to contribute to the potential proposed ordinance for the city. So if there's anyone that's interested, I would ask them to contact me. I have one individual that has already confirmed and is willing to do it and to sit on there and to provide input. I'm looking for approximately 4 to 5 more individuals that can help formulate something to bring to the council for the council to consider.
So I'm sorry, what date was that again?
It's June 14th from 2 to 5 p.m. Now, I don't know if it's going to go 3 hours, but that's the time we've blocked out.
There is also an additional panel member from Shasta City. The name is Jamie. She's already been contacted by SCI, and she will be on that panel as well.
Okay.
So why don't you, because this is being recorded live, why don't you define if you have it in front of you, or is it on our website?
What's that? The ordinance or the meeting itself?
The meeting and and how many, the panel people that you're looking for, and the purpose of the panel.
The purpose of the panel is to provide community input into the potential ordinance for the taxation of cannabis in the city of Oroville. We're looking for individuals that both agree with it and also disagree with whether it should be done, to provide input and constructive criticism on how best to implement something like this through a tax ordinance if that's what the citizens choose to do. So we're trying to prepare an ordinance to bring back to the community so that they will if we bring this forward, which it appears that we'll be doing, it'll be on the ballot in November. It'll be something that everyone's contributed to and that they can vote on.
So it's a community at large membership that you're looking for? Not necessarily council members. I mean,
no, not council members. We're looking for business owners. We're looking for people of the clergy. We're looking for professionals, school boards,
System.
Yeah,
principals, school teachers.
Average,
okay.
An average, citizen that just may be interested. I mean, just.
And how many positions? How big is this board?
Well, we're hoping to have no more than 10 people because we're going to do it in the fireside room, and we're just looking for 5 people that are essentially opposed to it and 5 people that are supportive of it, so that we can get a healthy perspective, hopefully from both sides.
I think I was speaking with somebody. John Mitchell. John Mitchell has signed up.
Pastor Mitchell has.
Yeah. Okay. Because somebody brought that up to me the other day. All right. Anybody have any other questions or comments on that?
I just wanted to add.
Had her hand up out there. Oh.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay. Any other reports? So you're saying we have to go back to closed session?
No more than 5 minutes.
So I just wanted to give additional information regarding the Scouts Hall breakfast on June 30th. 8 to 11, but the tickets are $8 per adult and $5 for children, and that's 12 and under.
I'd also like to mention that I forgot to mention Chuck Reynolds has also been involved and been at every meeting, been supportive of it, so he's also working with us on this project.
He's a part of the Rotary Club.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, if we are going to reconvene into closed session, we need to specify which number we're going in on.
Number 2, 2.2.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and reconvene to closed session for item 2.2, and we'll be back. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Oh, thank you. Okay, will do.
Yeah, I'll be right there.
So everything was good except the SBF. That was a 4-2. So.
And I gotta get that one corrected as soon as possible. So if we just get it updated, I'll track down.
This one?
Yeah.
I'll be ready to go in a few minutes.
Marlene, you're needed in closed session.
Yeah, I know. I'm going.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And let's see. Jack voted no on that.
Yeah.
And then that's the point.
Scars wasn't.
Oh, okay. I don't suppose you wouldn't keep that like that, would you? You'd retype it?
I would retype it, yeah.
Okay. this, do you just ask them all to stay and sign?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Try to catch them all.
Okay.
That's the, oh, the
Homeless
yeah.
and to Department of Water
Okay, perfect.
Resources, except,
But
for
Linda, I can hunt Linda down and get hers.
All right.
Yeah, this one I have to have in by the 20th.
Okay.
Which I know or the 22nd. Still safe on, we have another council meeting
Okay.
if need be, but
All right.
I wanna.
So we wanna make sure, I had two. I printed out two just in case you needed to. Did you need two?
We'll do one and I'll scan it.
All right.
She'll be happy with one, and I'll give her an original and we'll
Okay.
scan it and copy the rest. Thank you.
All right.
We're back from closed session. Direction given, no action taken. Correspondence is attached, if any. This meeting is adjourned. The next regularly scheduled meeting is June 19th, 2018, 5:30 closed session, 6:30 open. See you then. Thank you. Jack, before you leave, and the letters of support.
Council members, we would like to get your signature on some letters, please.
Stay tuned. They have to read them, yeah.
She was fooling me too.
All right, many thanks. Good meeting.
Thank you.